Hello friends, this is Rishabh and we are on video number 15. I welcome you to this Python journey called as Python Verse. In case you are coming here like you're directly landing to this video, I would recommend that you first go and watch the previous videos. They are interesting. You will learn a lot of good things about Python. So in this video, we are going to cover one more important aspect, that is functions. So yes, as I have written here, functions are our first face-to-face with reusability in programming. You must have heard about uh, uh, good practices when we are writing code. So one of the good practices to write reusable code. What exactly is meant by reusable code? Well, in programming, a lot of times we do repetitive things, like things which we have to do again and again. Now, what is the extent to which we can achieve reusability? That is very important, because if we have to write the same code again and again, and then in future if we have to change it, then it becomes a pain. And like industry has understood this thing a long time back, and so they have come up with certain pieces of reusability, I would say, or certain components of reusability, and functions happen to be the first component of reusability, because functions, they allow us to group together certain blocks of code which we have to run again and again, and then we can call that function instead of writing those statements again and again. Now before I go ahead and start talking about functions and their syntax, I think it's good to have an understanding of the hierarchy of the building blocks of code. So these are the building blocks of code. Now, see, this is not coming from the official documentation. This is my way of learning things. So again, you're free to build your own ways of understanding things, but this is how I break down the code. So at the very first level, we have statements. What are statements? Now, things like assignment. This is a statement where you are assigning a literal, that is 12, to a variable, that is x, right? This is a statement. This is a single statement. Similarly, if you do something like x equals 12, this will return you something. If I have to show this thing to you in my interpreter, let me just quickly do that. So let's say x equals 12. This is a statement because we have done, so this is called as assignment. We are assigning some value to a variable, right? Similarly, if I do x equals 12, this is also a statement. This is returning me something. So it's returning me something Boolean, right? Similarly, we have seen blocks as well. So for example, if we write if and then we write the condition. Okay, let me actually give this example in the next line. So just like this, so we write if, then there is certain condition, and then we write statements. And these statements, like a collection of statements, is called a block. We can always replace like multiple statements here. I can simply write code block here, right? So that is a block. When you group together multiple statements, let's say inside of this if condition, it's called a code block. Now when we talk about a function is the next level of I would say it's the next big thing after the block, where you can group together multiple blocks of code. Which means that in a single function you can have multiple if-else blocks, you can have for loops, you can have while loops. So all those statements can be grouped inside a function. Now after function comes the class. In a single class, I can have multiple functions. Some of them are class functions, some of them are static, some of them are let's say the instance methods of the class. We will talk about all this jargon later. If you do not understand any of these terms, for now that's not a problem. So I'm just telling you because like this is something which we will cover in the future. Then there can be multiple classes inside of a module. So when we refer to a module, we are basically referring to a Python file, and inside of that single module we can have multiple classes, we can have multiple functions, and so on, right? Now after like when we have to group together different modules, we group them into a package. So in Python, I can say a group of modules, when modules are bundled together, we form a package. Now, if I have to talk about a complex real world project, you will see that a real world project is composed of many such packages. Packages plus modules, of course, right? So this is how the hierarchy looks like. We have looked at the statements in the previous videos. We have looked at what exactly blocks are, right? And now we are going to talk about functions, and in the coming videos we will talk about other things like classes, modules, packages, complex projects, etc. Right? Cool. So yes, let's look at the syntax of a function. So with the understanding which we have gained so far, let's try to look at the syntax. So def function name, and then the code, all the code statements which we want to write, or the code block in short, right? So there are some like examples of functions. I have included very basic examples because the idea is that we have to understand what function is, what exactly is the syntax, and then we can build on complex functions later on. That's not a problem for now. So basic mathematical operations, calculator, revisited. We did a simple calculator in one of the previous videos. And so what I'm thinking is that let's try to do the same thing, but this time using functions. Cool. So let us just create a new file. Oops. Yeah. So let me just call it kelsey.py, right? And now let's understand a very basic function. This is going to be our the first function which we are writing in the series. So let me just say def add, and let me just pass in two variables a and b. Now all this function has to do is this function will simply return. Okay, I didn't talk about what exactly return and return types are. So functions can return values, but before that let's look at those functions which do not return values. Let me just call this add and print. Let me pass in a and b. Now here what we can do is, let me have a new variable c, which is nothing but the summation of a and b. Now I can simply print c, right? If you see this, there is no return statement, so this function is not returning anything. Now let's try to execute this function. Now let's do one thing. Let me just ask the user what exactly is it that they want to add. So here we go. Let me say a. I believe you already know about typecasting now, so that's I'm using it freely here. So let me say enter input a, and let's do a /n for the new line here. Similarly, b equals int input enter b. As you can notice, we are not much concerned about user passing in the wrong values for now. We will take care of them later on. Now let me call this function add and print, and then let me pass the values a and b, right? Cool. Let me just exit out of here, and let's just go ahead and call Python video 15 kelsey.py. Enter input a, let me add 34, enter input b, let me add 2, and 36 is the result. So as you can see that when we call this function and when we pass a and b, right, so this is what gets executed. Add and print is called. Then inside of this, like execution flows like this. First of all, this statement executes wherein we say c is equal to a plus b, which means whatever values for a and b are passed, they gets added and stored inside of this variable c, and then that is printed. Now what happens if I try to store the return, like whatever this function is returning, let me just try to store it somewhere. So let me have a new function as a result equals add and print a and b. Now what happens if we try to print this result? Let's just see this. So let me execute this again, and let me add 34 again, let me add 2 again. Now you can see 36 and none. So if you see that result is nothing but none. Okay, let me actually do this. The result is, yeah. So yeah, here we go, 4 and 8, and you see result is none. Even though the function is doing its job, but as you can see that this function is not returning anything to the caller. So like this is the piece of code where we called this function in this statement add and print, right? But we are not returning anything. So by default, if there is no return statement present in the function, then it will return a none type. So none is like very similar to a null type, which represents nothing. So it's like void. These functions are also called as void in some languages, but in Python we do not have to specify that what type is it because of its dynamic nature. So yeah, by default it returns us none. Now let me do one thing. Let me just let me just comment this function, and now let's look at this function. So we are saying def add a and b, then we are saying return a plus b. Here the return statement is present, which means some value will be returned. So first of all, let's see what happens if we just call add a and b, right? And nothing else. As you can see, we are capturing a from the user input, we are capturing b, then we are just calling this function add a and b, right? Let's just do that. Let me just call the script. Okay, enter the value of a, let's add 2, enter the value of b, let's add 5, and that's all. Nothing is printed on the screen. Why? Because there is no print statement present inside of this function. There is just one return statement, which means that whenever somebody calls this function, it will return that a plus b value to them. But here, because we are not capturing that returned value, we have to capture that returned value. So let me just do that. So let's have another variable that is the result, and now let's try to print result is, let's just put F for formatting here, and let me just write result here. Cool. Okay, now let's just try to execute this. So Python this, enter input a4, then b 8, and result is 12. So this time, as you can see, that when this code called the add function executed, and the returned value was stored here inside of this result. So this is how we capture the value which is returned by the function. So as we can see that there are two types of functions. One type is where nothing is returned, a none type is returned by default, and then there are functions wherein we actually explicitly return something. So in the real world scenarios, you will mostly see these functions where we are returning something, and this is an example of it. And similarly, we can write some more functions. Now, in order to actually understand the value of reusability, let's try to build something slightly more complex than what we have done here. So let's just do one thing. Let me just create a function for this as well. So for example, function capture input, right? So we are capturing the input from the user, and so let us just move these two lines here, right? Okay, now let's just return these values as a and b. This is interesting. We are returning two values now. Let's see what happens. So let me just say x y equals capture input, and that's all. We are doing nothing. Now let's see what happens. What do we get inside of x and y? Let me just execute this code. So one is 4, one is 5. Okay, we have captured the values. We have done nothing with those values. Cool. Let me just do a print here. Cool. So x is, let's say x, and y is, let's say y. We are just trying to print the values which are entered by the user. Let me just execute this. Okay, 6, then 9. So x is 6, y is 9. So which means we can easily use this function to capture the input. Now once we have captured the input, we can pass on that input to this add function, and we can add things, right? Now let's try to do something even more interesting. We have studied about loops in the previous videos, and as I mentioned, if you have landed directly to this video, you feel free to go and watch those videos first. So here, let me just do a while true. Now if you see that inside of while, I'm explicitly passing a true value. So in a way, I'm creating an infinite loop here. As you can notice that this is an infinite loop, right? Cool. While true, let's say that we have to do this thing, that x and y equals capture input. So I have captured x and y, right? Now let's say result equals add x and y, print with formatting result of, just a second, result of addition is, let's say, result. And now we have done this addition once. Now let's do one thing. Let's say print, again formatted /n. We can ask user for another input. Let's say, let me also convert this to a function only. Ask user for more input, right? Or for now, let's just do it without function only. So let's print f print 1 to perform more calculations or any other key to exit, right? Cool. So if user enters 1, then we have to perform more calculations, right? Otherwise we have to exit. Cool. So now let's capture the input. So user choice equals int input. Okay, I think I should write this inside of this input function only. I don't have the need for that print statement, and this needs to be a enter 1 to perform more calculations or any other key to exit. Cool. Okay, so let me just cut this. So now we have the user choice. Now let's do some if else here. If user choice equals 1, then we have to say break. Break means get out of the while loop, and if it is anything else, then there is no problem, because then we have to continue this while loop only, right? So this is the code, which means we are trying to build a calculator in a slightly complex manner now, wherein user can perform the calculations more than one time. So let's see. Let me just execute this. Input A is 45, input B is, let's say, 8. Result of the calculation is 53. Now enter 1 to perform more calculations or any other key to exit. Oops, I just realized we have done something wrong here. So we have done something wrong here, because in this scenario, if I enter 1, it will exit. So let me make some changes. So this always happens when you're writing code. You can make some wrong choices, just the way I did. So user choice is saying that enter 1 to perform more calculations, right, and any other key to exit, which means that if user choice is not equal to 1, only then you have to break. If it is 1, then we have to continue, right? So let me just call this function again. So input A, let me just add 5, input B, let me add 10. So result is 15. Now enter 1 to perform more calculations or any other key to exit. Let me just add 1. So again, it will ask me for another set of inputs. So let me just add 56. Let me add 4. So result of addition is 60. Again, enter 1 to perform more calculations or any other key to exit. Let's say we want to perform one more calculation. I entered 1 again. So again, let me add 60. Let me add 60. Cool. Result of addition is 120. Enter 1 to perform more calculations or any other key to exit. This time I want to exit. So I will simply say 8 or 9, anything. And my function exits out of this. So of course we can make it even more complex. So there is absolutely no limit to what we can imagine and build out of the skills which we have already learned through this Python series. But yeah, this was just a slightly complex example of how exactly we can make the calculator better. So in the future videos, when we talk about things like classes and then modules, we can see that like we can actually build it even more complex. We can start providing more I would say choices to the user based on what exactly they want to perform. So there is so much to learn. I would say we have just started, but I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about functions, and you can always comment and tell me and share your thoughts as well. Cool. So yep, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next one. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.